Okay. All right. So as I go through some of this stuff today, I really would like you guys to jump in when you can for any comments. But I'm going to start with this. Nothing's ever absolute. When we say things like answer every question with a question, we don't really mean answer every question with a question. We really mean like answer more questions with questions. But if you take everything so literal that what we say, yes, it can be, some of our training can be inconsistent. So as you go through this stuff, just remember we don't mean it literally every single time you try things. So when we think about sales optimism is thinking about realistically what's happening, what's really going on. Where are you in the sales process? Do you really understand? Is this client just trying to steal my free consulting? Is this client really an opportunity? Did they really tell you the truth about their budget? And sales posturing is for you as a salesperson to have the ability to differentiate between what's really going on and what the client might be trying to accomplish for their own purposes. And so I want you to think about it this way. The reason I put this slide up here is, are we selling or are we thinking about servicing? Because if you're thinking about how do I service this person? How do I present the product or service that's best going to represent and help that client? Now you're serving them instead of trying to sell. And one of the quotes that I like is, if anytime you're trying to sell for your reasons, okay, you're a hard closer. If you're trying to sell because you need to meet your quota for this month, or you got to get your bonus now, anytime you're making the sale about you instead of the customer, then you're really not servicing the customer. And I really think that the best salespeople are people that go into this mindset. How can I take my product and service and best service the client as opposed to just try and sell them something? And I want you to think about it this way. Most people get into sales and they think sales is about convincing, coercing, manipulating, tricking, trying to get somebody to buy something. Now remember, the prospects are thinking, this guy's going to try and convince me to buy something I don't need or want. So anytime you feel like you're trying to convince the client, as opposed to taking them on a tour and you're the tour guide and together you're discovering what they need or want, then you're really not being an effective salesperson. So give me an example. If anybody give me an example of a salesperson in your world that's trying to sell you something, but they were doing it in a convincing, trying to convince you, as opposed to helping to discover that you might need their product or service. Can anybody got a recent example of, because it helps drive home the point we're trying to make here. Has anybody got an example of a salesperson trying to convince you of something?
I was buying car parts a couple weeks ago, and the guy tried to sell me every possible part that I could need. I knew what I needed, but you might need this and you might need that. Why don't you just take it all now? That way you have it. I'm not. Okay. I don't need $250 worth of extra parts.
So what he said is, did he really say that? Why don't you take it now?
Yeah, why don't you just take it now, so that way you have it, and if you need it, you can just use it, and then you can just bring it back.
Okay.
They figure, well, he'll just keep it. He's not going to bring it back.
So why was he selling for your reasons or his?
His. They were trying to meet a quota for the week or something. I heard him talking in the back while I was waiting.
Wow.
Just sell them everything you can. Sell them everything you can.
And how'd that make you feel?
Well, I just said, I don't need it. I need this, I don't need all this other stuff, I didn't get on them because I was gonna, but
so if you really was selling or saying to you, hey, why don't you take it now so that you have it if you need it, because you live 100 miles away and it's going to be ridiculous to drive back 4 or 5 different times, that might have had some merit, correct? If he was selling because that was for your reason.
Right.
But take it now in case you need it was more for his reason. Okay.
Right.
See, and that's where I'm trying to get. I think clients, prospects can sense that. Anytime you're trying to push them and convince them, I think people know that. Now, if you can put it in a question format to get them to discover that that might be a great idea. If he had said something to you, Dave, like, well, suppose I said this is a hot item, we're having inventory issues. If you come back, the chances are this part that you might need in the future might not be here. Would that be maybe a reason why you might want to take one with you now? Would that have might had a little bit more merit with you if you would sell them for that reason?
In another case, I guess it would have. However, I knew I could pick up the parts.
Right.
You know.
But if that was actually true, that, hey, we're having, these parts just don't come in that often. We've got one now. There's probably going to be 4 or 5 people who are going to pick this up, and we've got a waiting list already. Why don't you take it now? That way you have it. If he was selling for your reasons, if that was to you as opposed to for him, then I think maybe you might have been more involved in the sale. So again, why I've left this slide up here is I think so many times salespeople are trying to convince somebody instead of thinking, how do we work together to discover why this client might need to do something now? Any about others got any comments on this one? No? Okay. This is the different one between interrogation and curiosity. We talk a lot about asking the right questions, but it can sound sometimes like an interrogation versus seriously being curious and skeptical about the reasons why this client might need your product or service. So anytime it starts to sound too much like you're doing too many questions, you're asking questions just because you have a list of questions that you want to get through, and it starts sounding like a police interrogation instead of, hey, I'm curious, why would you want to do this? Why do you need to do it now? That there's a fine line between asking questions just because you think, hey, this is the process I need to go through, I've got to ask questions, and you really being curious and skeptical about the application of your product or service to solve the client's needs. Anybody been through an interrogation lately with a client or a salesperson that's trying to interrogate you? No.
They sent over art, and it didn't make a lot of sense. We have a meeting with them, and I felt like I was asking him, interrogating him, trying to find out what exactly they were looking for. So I felt like I was asking a lot of questions, and I wasn't getting all the answers that I needed.
Okay.
So I just kept asking the questions so I could find out what I needed to know. But I kind of felt like the amount of questions I was asking, that I was interrogating him to try to get all the answers I needed.
Anybody know what rule that we've talked about in the past might apply to this situation? Anybody? She used a word, feel. Here's the rule, or suggestion.
70-30.
I'm sorry, Troy?
I just thought of the 70-30 rule.
Yeah, that applies. They should be doing.
What's the 70-30 rule?
Troy, go ahead.
The client should be doing 70% of the talking.
Well, where I was going, then that's the rule. That's right. Is if you feel it, say it. So when you feel like you're interrogating because you're not getting the information, you can say to the prospect of the client, hey, can I share with you how I'm feeling right now? I feel like I'm not doing a very good job. I'm asking a lot of questions. It's turning into an interrogation, and I apologize for that. I'm just not, for some reason, I'm not getting enough information here to adequately satisfy you. So again, the technique is, if you feel it, say it. I feel that this is going down the wrong path. I feel that I'm interrogating you. And do you mind if I explain to you why I'm asking so many questions? Remember, prospects can't get mad at you for doing something they give you permission to do. So when you're asking a lot of questions, you need to stop and ask permission. Hey, do you mind if I ask a couple more questions? Because I'm just not really sure how this works. Does that make sense? That sometimes you got to feel, say, tell them how you feel about what's going on if it starts to sound too much like an interrogation.
Okay.
Now, this is where it's one of those fine lines we talk about, because in Sandler, in the past, you might have heard me train and say, answer every question with a question. Well, if you really take that comment so literal, yeah, it's going to turn into an interrogation. You really have to be curious and skeptical about how this client is going to be served by your product. So think about it this way. If it ends in a period, you're telling. If it ends in a question, then you're selling. Now, again, this doesn't always apply, because again, you can't, in a conversation with a prospect or a client, you can't always do questions. But if you're making too many statements that end in periods, then you're trying to tell and push them to a conclusion, where again, at the beginning, it should be a series of questions that you should be asking. So when we say, no talking on a sales call, again, don't take everything we say so literal. We really mean you're obviously going to talk, but ask questions or tell stories instead of just pitching. Remember, in the old traditional method of selling, it is warm up. I don't think you can find a sales book today that talks about a system of selling that doesn't start without some type of warm up. Obviously they all start that way. Get the client to like you, look around the room, find something of commonality, and then immediately to traditional selling is, well, I know you're busy, let me show you what I have. And you start going into benefits and features, right? And then that's traditional. Well, benefits and features, dog and pony show, that came for 3M, Minnesota Mining and Manufacturing, come up with that phrase. And then typically after we've warmed up, we started doing benefits and features. Then we start getting stalls and objections from the client. Then we start trying to overcome stalls and objections. And then we try and do a trial close, like let's say you wanted to do this, and then you're fighting off. So the traditional selling is what the client expects. The client expects you to go into why you're the latest, greatest, most improved, why they should buy from you, and pitch. What we want to do is start asking questions like, I'm not sure that Graphic House fits in your world, as I'm not sure if what we do for hundreds of other clients fits. You mind if I ask you some questions so we can determine even what strategy we want to go through? That's what we mean by just don't jump into benefits and features, start asking questions. No comments on that one? Okay. Ask yourself this: am I asking enough questions at the beginning, or am I going into premature presentation and start pitching too soon? So let me ask you this question, folks. What are 3 steps in the step-up system? When we talk about a systematic approach to the clients, what steps are really designed for the prospect? Playful out, folks. What are the 3 steps that really are designed for the prospect? Chris, how about you? I'm going to start picking people. Any thoughts of what fits in your world
To
here?
be honest with you, I'm lost on what the 3 steps even are.
Okay. Well, remember, size up the situation. T, take them to their pain. E, extend the pain into the future. And P, propose a solution.
Well, design for the prospect is obviously taking them to their pain as one.
Right. Sizing up the situation is you. That's your situation. That's you as a salesperson. That's designed for you to get a lay of the land, get an idea.
Figuring out a solution.
Yeah, take them to their pain, extending the pain in the future, and proposing a solution are all designed for the prospect. So if you think about what I'm trying to go for in this slide is if you think about it that way, that in the step, as we look at right here, T, E, and P, I should be thinking about it from the prospect's point of view instead of mine, because those 3 steps are designed for the prospect. What's their pain? Take them to their pain. Extend that pain into the future. What if we don't do anything? What if we do something? Tell me what your business is like a year from now because today you chose to buy from us. What if you make the wrong decision? How does your thing get solved if you make the decision to go cheap, but you don't get the quality you're looking for? So that's what I'm trying to get you to understand is in each one of those 3 steps, those last 3 steps, you should be thinking about it. Those are designed for the prospect, not you. And I think that's where some people, you transition from, you start with a good business plan or a strategy, and then we fall into this trap where we got to get across our information. We got to get across why we're the latest, greatest, most improved. We stop thinking about how's the client, how does this serve and help the client? So start putting this all together. Are we serving the client's needs in the S, the E, and the P steps, or are we trying to get across our benefits and features and trying to convince this person why they should buy? So start putting these previous slides that I put together on this presentation in one frame and sit there and think, okay, yes, am I selling this person or am I servicing this person when I take them to their pain? Am I trying to convince this person when I extend the pain in the future, or are we trying to discover together what might happen if they don't make the right decision? P, am I proposing a solution that's best for the client, or am I proposing a solution that's best for me? And if you're always thinking about it for what's designed for the prospect, I think you're going to be in a better position than if I'm presenting a solution because it's better for us. I'm trying to get them to buy this cabinet because we've got the extra material on hand, even though I know that something else might be better for them. You always should be doing it for the prospect's benefit instead of yours. So that's why I wanted you to think about the step up system. It was when you're in each one of these steps, are you doing it for the client or are you doing it for you? A couple of tactical things. Never ask a verb-led question. Now, again, never, but try and eliminate many of these is, can, do, would, or does when you start with your questions. Any reason why? I want to hear from a couple of people why I've got this slide up here, why you should try and reduce at least the questions that you start with verbs.
They're too closed-ended.
Good. Very good. That's one of the reasons, the answers I was looking for. Anybody else?
It's too direct. It's too pointed.
Which means it's more in what we've done in training in the past. It's kind of, anybody remember
more-
the,
It's not
You're putting them on
nurturing.
the spot.
It's not so nurturing.
exactly. That's where I was going for, Chris. You're right. These can come off if you don't do them right with your tone. The words you use can come off as critical parent. You know, that's why you want to try and limit those statements like that. Ask curious questions like who and what and when, where, why, how. Ask questions that aren't as leading. Doesn't sound like you already know the answer to it. Okay. So type A style questions, you know, what would be a solution that you would look for? How would you like to move forward? How would you like to have this presentation? And when you ask when questions, be careful, because if you don't word it correctly, it could sound like you're charging this person with procrastination. Okay. Or when you use a word like who, be careful doesn't come across like you're blaming them, you know, who made this decision, who bought that sign, you know, why did you go with that color? If you don't do it in the right way, those questions can sound like you're blaming somebody or you're accusing them of being a victim. So make sure you think about these questions that you're asking in advance, because if you don't take time to think about the question you're asking and how it could be perceived, you think you've asked a really great question, but the client heard it a different way. We're very, you know, all of us are very sensitive sometimes, and we don't want to be accused of procrastination. We don't want to be blamed for a past decision. We don't want to be put in a position of being the victim. So be careful that you ask these questions correctly. And I'll give you an example. If anybody's read Dale Carnegie's book written in 1932, How to Win Friends and Influence People, a lot of great information in the book. Well written, good book, good things. But over the years, it's become a little bit more critical parent. Like being able to attract top paying customers is important to you, isn't it? Well, of course, that's like that's a stupid question if you really think about it. Being able to attract top paying customers is important to you, isn't it? The salesperson thinks he's asking a question because, boy, I went through sales training and told me to ask questions, but it comes across as almost condescending in a way. Of course I wanted it. Where our selling, what we want to think about is how do you limit client recruitment to only clients that are willing to pay top dollar? That's more of a curiosity question. That question incites more information from the client instead of one that makes them feel like, of course I want to save money. So think about your questions. Are you asking in a way that really is, hey, I'm curious and skeptical. How did you plan to attract more people? I'm curious, skeptical. What do you think would draw more people into your store? What colors were you thinking about? And you start asking those questions that really get the client involved in the conversation and doesn't feel like that interrogation that we're looking for. Here's a mistake. Sometimes we do some tie downs at the end of a question. Like, I'm guessing that you limit your client recruitment to only A players, don't you? Or aren't they? Or doesn't it? Or isn't it? These are tie downs at the end that, again, sound elementary, or they come across as dismissive to the client. You want to save a lot of money, don't you? You're always looking for ways to save money, aren't you? Those come across as condescending to the client. Now, remember, Maya Angelou said it best. I love her quote. People will forget what you said. People will forget what you did, but people will not forget how you made them feel. So the idea of this training today, these tactical questions are we following the questioning format, but yet how are we making that client feel about the questions that we ask? So I love that line. Remember it. People will forget what you said. They will forget what you did, but they'll never forget how you made them feel. So does your questions make them feel elementary? Does it make them feel like you're asking them rudimentary, easy questions? Or are you really curious and skeptical and asking questions to get more information? One of the other rules is never answer an unasked question. Don't give too much information that you're providing. You might have done a bad job when a client says to you, boy, you've given me a lot to think about. I mean, if you ever get that, what happens is you probably provided more information and now you confuse the client. Now the client has got to think about it, of whether these are legitimate pains that maybe you brought up. You told them that, hey, this is a problem, you have this problem, you ought to do this. Now the client's got to take time to go back and think about it. So remember, anytime the client says you've given me a lot to think about, you've failed in the one rule: educate today, sell today, educate tomorrow. You over-educated them. Sometimes when we educate a client, we give them so much information, we make them a educated consumer for our competition. So be careful about it. But it is okay for you, all right, to ask an unasked question. It's okay for you to say, client, hey, at this point in the conversation, most people usually ask me about warranties. Any reason you didn't ask me about warranties yet? Or a lot of my clients are curious about supply distribution. Any reason you didn't ask me about the timing and whether we're going to be able to deliver on time? Would it surprise you if I said that we have a lot of materials already on hand, that for the sign we're talking about here, I don't think we're going to need to order materials and be subject to making sure we're going to have it delivered? We've already got it in the warehouse. Could that be a problem that a smaller company, sign company, might run into? They can design a great sign for you, but then they don't have the size, the volume that we have, and they might not have the materials on hand. Could that be a concern? Would that frustrate you? You start using all those emotional words that you put in a question format, but what you're really saying is, hey, we're a large sign company. We've got a full building full of product and service. We can probably fulfill. Are you concerned that somebody else who's got to ship this out to a third party for completion might be delayed in delivery? Would working with a design, build, service company help alleviate some of those fears? Now, in that way, in a question format, isn't that so much better than trying to tell them, hey, you don't want to go with such and such sign company. They have to farm it out and send it to somebody else. They probably don't have materials on hand. They're probably not going to meet your deadlines as far as delivery. That all might be true, but because you told the client, do they believe it? Right? Remember the rule. Clients only believe half of what a salesman tells them, but 100% of what they say. And if we all, and I'm guilty of it, if we all really could go back and replay all of our presentations, our sales presentations, I bet every one of us was wished there was more times that we asked questions instead of trying to push somebody to a direction. So you can, if there's certain things that you wish they'd ask you because you'd look like a hero, you should be able to ask those questions. Hey, any reason you didn't ask me about our design team, about how we come up with the unique designs? Any thoughts that you have? Well, because we've got people been with us for a long time. They understand different elements. They understand this, and this. If I said that we just hired some new design people right out of college, would that make you feel secure that we're going to be able to come up with creative solutions to your problem? You can put your statements in a question format to get your benefits and features across. Features and benefits are important, but it's how you present them to the client that's more important. Any comments on this slide before I move on? Okay. But I want you to use tone to make it sound like a question. Remember, when we talk about communications, 55% is body language, 38% tone, and words are 7%. So statements, remember the first slide I showed you that says if it ends in a period, you're not, well, this is one of those where I said it's a contradiction in my own training here. So I'm guessing it's only a minor issue, though it might end in a period. And I left the period off here on purpose because if you do it in a question format, in a tone, it can sound like, hey, I'm guessing it's only a minor issue, or it's probably not costing you much. It almost sounds like a question, requires an answer to it. I really don't understand how would we fit in? How would we fit into what your marketing strategies? I mean, you have a design team. How do we fit into whether we should just take your specifications and duplicate them, or are you looking for us to try and add, or if we came up with another concept or an idea, would you be open to that? Those are those curious type of questions, instead of saying to the client, hey, we've really got a great design team. They're going to look at your designs, but they'll probably, tweak it a little bit. Now, how does the client really feel about that? We got to be careful about that. But if you don't put a question format, is that, hey, our design team might come up with some ideas. How would we fit in if we came up with some different ways of designing your sign other than what you thought? Is that something you'd like to have a conversation about? That's still curious and skeptical, instead of trying to convince them that your design team was going to come up with better designs. And marketing has to be addressing it for you. Again, those are statements, yet using tone, it'll sound like a question. Okay. So I don't think we practice enough. I mean, if every one of you were in a play and you were rehearsing your lines, most actors say that once I read my lines 12 times, I pretty much have it. It's kind of and salespeople, do we practice this? Do we even do it in front of the mirror? Do we practice our tone? Do we practice our questions? Or do we just go out there and wing it? The rhetorical answer to the question is most salespeople go out and wing it instead of practice putting these questions and really being curious and skeptical. So what's the danger in asking this question? When do you plan on making the decision about? What's the danger in asking that question? Anybody? Or even, is there any danger in it? Let's see, who haven't we heard from here? Matt, what's the danger in asking this question? Any?
Matt just took off.
Oh,
Leave for a meeting.
Okay. Jarrett's gone. Mike's off.
This is something that we ask all the time, because we always ask about timeline. I can't really think of any danger.
I guess maybe your tone, if their tone's wrong.
Yeah. Chris, you're right.
Does it sound pushy or
Well, there you
needy?
go. Yeah. Troy, that's what you got to be careful if this can sound pushy, like you're trying to push them to a decision right away. I mean, again, are you asking this question for the client or for you? It comes across you're asking for you, so you can put it on your estimation sheet. You can put it into your flow plan for the sales. You can put it. It sounds too much like you're asking it for your reasons. How could you put it in a different way? How could you ask a question about decision that sounds like it's for the client?
Is there a timeline that you planned on making this project or bringing this project to fruition? Is there, any urgency that I should be
Yeah.
concerned about with regards to your position?
There you go. Yep. I like that. Stay kind of behind it is what Dave's saying here. Don't get in front of this question. Stay kind of behind it. Like, I don't suppose this needs to be decided quickly. I don't suppose there's any sense of urgency when it comes to you making a decision. Again, that doesn't sound like you're trying to push them. It's like you're almost saying, this probably doesn't need to be decided right away, but at least it can still get you information about the timeline, like Dave said. So be careful about does your question sounds like you're pushing them to a quick decision, or are you curious and skeptical about when they have to make a decision? So that's where I'm going for with today's training is stay kind of behind these questions so that you can say like, I don't suppose there's any urgency in making a decision. You probably don't need to make a quick decision, and let the client say, well, no, we need this done by December. Okay, so if we were to actually get this done by December, when were you thinking we'd actually need to pull the trigger to start the process? It starts getting you into that conversation with the client instead of sounding like you're trying to push them to a decision. Remember, we all as buyers, we're afraid that the salesperson's going to try and close us. That's really what, and even if we might be ready to close, anytime we feel like we're being pushed to a decision, we kind of naturally resist. Okay, good answer, Dave. Anybody else want any danger in asking this question? Okay, it's not a completely wrong. It's just be careful about how it comes across, as it doesn't sound pushy. Okay, some other dumb questions like, what keeps you up at night? Now, again, this has got to be worded correctly. Do you have a budget for this project? Now, instead of saying it that direct, what's another way you could say, do you have a budget for this project?
I don't suppose you have some kind of a round number that we could talk to our estimating team so we know to stay within your budget?
Very good. Very good. Much better. Yep. Okay. Who are the decision makers? What's a better way of asking that?
I don't suppose there's anybody else besides yourself that would be a part of this decision-making process.
Good. Again, if it sounds, I'm sorry, go ahead. Who's going to talk?
What I usually say is, can you tell me a little bit about what the decision-making process looks like?
Okay. Because why would you ask that question? What are you trying to go for? It's a good question, but I want to explore what's the reason behind asking it.
Well, I think it's kind of, when you say, can you tell me, you're encouraging them. It's kind of open-ended. You're just encouraging them to talk. And it covers both decision makers as well as timeline.
But you're asking Troy, you're asking the question for a reason. You're asking the question so that you know whether there's somebody else you need to present to.
Right.
So lead with that. I think sometimes we forget to put the purpose behind our question. Hey, I'm just curious, is there anybody else that we might need to do another presentation to? Is there anybody that would have veto authority that we need to have a conversation with? Is there somebody that you seek their input for? And that's why I was asking the question. I was just asking to see if there's another meeting we might need to have with somebody else who's a person of influence when it comes to making this. I guess what I'm going for here is, we assume, we've asked these questions so many times, we assume the client knows why I'm asking the question. And many times they think you're just trying to do an end around. Who are the decision makers? They might perceive that question as, oh, you want to know who the real decision maker is and do an end around and go talk to somebody else and make me look bad. So be careful about how you ask these questions, what I'm going for today, and think about, why are you really asking the question? If you feel it, say it, tell them why you're asking the question, because otherwise it comes across like a question every salesperson asks. It doesn't make you any different than anybody else. Everybody else is going to ask the same question, but can you frame this question in a way that the client understands why you ask it, and then is more willing to provide you with the information that you want? Stop sounding like an amateur. I really, one that frustrates me is, I know you're busy. How many of you, when you call some prospect, hey, I know you're busy, as opposed to, I work with busy people like yourself all the time. Can I take 10 seconds to tell you why I called? Stop. I love that one. Did I catch you at a good time? Well, no, it's never a good time to talk to a salesperson, right? I know you're trying to save money. Well, of course, these sound like amateur questions. What you should be doing is thinking, as far as, does your question come across as a critical parent? I need to know, or, you're wrong, that's not true. Tell me about this and that. And it just, tell me why you made that decision. Tell me why you bought that sign. Tell me why you picked that color. All those come across as that critical parent. Nurturing would be, would you be so kind as to help me understand? Would it surprise you to learn, like Chris said earlier, suppose I said, could you share with me? Remember, share is a fantastic word to use, because mama taught you to share or to play fair. So focus groups learn all the time that people that use the word share, would you mind sharing with me? Or can I share with you? That is a very nurturing word that, if you're not using it, add it to your vocabulary and start using it when you talk to a client. Start watching your language and thinking about it. Am I coming across as I'm trying to push them? I'm coming across as critical parent, or am I curious, skeptical, and nurturing? Okay. So in my world, it's going to sound like this. If I'm talking to a client, potential client, I'll say things like, I'm curious, is it a lack of opportunities in the pipeline, or the quality of the opportunities in your pipeline that might be leading to some sales challenges? Help me understand, how do you know that? How do you know that it's the quality of the opportunities that your salespeople have in the pipeline, as opposed to the number of opportunities? And I had a guy last week say, because we track it. We really track how many people are in the pipeline. And then each salesperson is supposed to have a formula we talk about to quantify which lead might be more advantageous than another. And I might ask questions like, how do you keep excuses from occurring with your sales team? How do you work to make sure that your sales team isn't making excuses about the marketplace, or why they didn't get a lead, or why they didn't have the proper tools to follow up on leads? These are questions that, instead of making statements, get clients to start giving me more information. Remember, information is power. The more information you have, the more power. You're still trying to gather more information. You'll make more sales. Again, I've said this before, but I like to drive home the point. Reinforcement is the best form of training. You'll make more sales, not because you have a better product or service than your competitor, although I believe we do, but you'll make more sales because you find a pain or a problem that the competition didn't find. People don't buy your product or service, they buy solutions to their problems. So if you ask enough questions and you find another problem somebody didn't find, then you go back into our step system or propose a solution, you're more likely to make a sale because you did a better job of getting information than your competition. I ask questions like, what do you track? What are your people held accountable for? How do you know that you're hiring the right kind of salespeople? You guys should be thinking the same type of questions that just don't sound like everybody else would ask. If you think that your competition would ask the question, don't. Reframe it so that it sounds different. If you look, act, and sound like every other salesperson, the prospect will treat you like every other salesperson. So come up with these questions that dig deeper and get you more information. you know, I just want to give you some examples of what I use, and then hopefully you guys can take from this training and go back to each one of these slides. We've recorded this, so I'll send you the recording and frame it yourself. Like, could there be issues with call reluctance? And they, well, yeah. You know, why? Why do you suppose there's issue with your salespeople having call reluctance? Or if they say no, are you really sure? How do you know? How do you track it? And again, how you frame the question that you really are curious and skeptical will get you more information than if you just tell somebody, I'm sure you're having problems with call reluctance. Everybody I talk to has problems with call reluctance. That doesn't make the client feel special. It makes them sound like everybody else. So you might be right if you tell them that, but again, if you're telling, you're not selling. Okay. I might say, this is one question you guys can ask that kind of puts people in a different frame of mind. How many of your salespeople are failing to overachieve? It's kind of a negative reverse in a way. You know, how many of your salespeople are failing to overachieve makes them think, do you know why? And then because. So I want to stop here at this because most of you are too young to remember Walter Cronkite. Does anybody remember who I'm talking about? Yes, no?
Yes, I do.
I do.
See, we just dated ourselves, didn't we? Those of us.
I know. Yeah, that
All
hurt.
right. Walter Cronkite wrote a great book on interviewing. And by the way, if you're ever looking for books, it's a great book to read. Walter Cronkite. Walter Cronkite was on CBS News. He was at one time categorized as the most trusted man in America. Matter of fact, John Anderson, when he ran for president on independent ticket one year, was almost going to recruit Walter Cronkite to be his vice president. Walter Cronkite started interviewing some great leaders. And he wrote in his book that you can ask the question because 3 times before it gets annoying. And if you ever go back and look at his interview of Anwar Sadat and some other people, they answer his question, and instead of just they didn't answer it completely like a lot of politicians do. They don't completely answer it. He would ask because 3 times. And when he answered because, they gave him more information. So it is a 1-word question that can get more information from a client. Well, we're always looking to drive more traffic into our store because sales are down 15% over last year because, well, and it wasn't all because of the COVID, it was because of the competition we had from a guy just a block down the street because, well, he put up a bigger sign and I think it attracted. And now because you asked because 3 times, look at the different information that you got. All right. So I just don't think that we spend enough time sharpening our asking questions. We walk in and we think we're ready to present instead of asking questions. Okay, a couple more slides here. How many of your salespeople are comfortable with your expectations? That might be a question I ask to get some more information. All, and I'm responding with, are you sure? How do you know? And if they say none, why not? These are things that you can be prepared for. When you ask a question, you can think about what are the 3 ways this client might be able to answer it? Yes, no, maybe. And then you can respond to be prepared for it. So I guess what I'm saying today is just don't listen to today's session and forget about it. Go back and review this and think about where are areas that you want to get better at in questioning. What are certain questions that you haven't asked in the past that you're going to do a better job of asking in the future? Start thinking about, am I really a professional question asker? Am I asking questions on a professional level because I really need this information? Because if I have the information, I can do a better job of servicing my customer. Or am I just asking questions because that's what I was taught to ask questions? All right. I might ask questions like, do your salespeople in prospecting have really good techniques? And every one of you, I want to introduce to you a new theory. It's called the 3 Ps: permission, protection, and potency. And what I mean by that is ask permission, okay? And it protects you and the client. So it sounds like this. Can I take 20 seconds to tell you why I called? And then you can tell me if you want to talk more. Would that be fair? See how you're asking for permission can I take a few minutes to explore why we might be different than our competition? That is so much better than saying, can I tell you why we're better? Can I take 20 seconds to explore the reasons why our service might fit for what you're looking for? Again, those are better ways of phrasing the questions, and it does get permission. People can't get mad at you for doing something they gave you permission to do. All right. So I'll lead with a question like this. While speaking with many presidents and CEOs about business climate in Wisconsin, two things have been fairly consistent. Not enough business opportunities coming in, and the business that are coming in isn't as profitable as they would like. These probably aren't issues for you. See how that question, I set them up by saying, I've got credibility. I've heard these challenges or issues before, but instead of pushing them in a direction and saying, I'm sure that's a problem you have, and now he's got to defend his situation, you reverse it with probably not issues for you. And if they say, nope, those aren't issues for me, then you can go on the next step and you've protected that client. You haven't attacked them as these are problems that you probably have. But if these are problems and you say, probably not issues for you, oh yeah, we're experiencing the same challenges. And then you tell me more and you start going right into your questioning format. So you guys should think of a question that kind of does it the same way in your world, like speaking with, marketing executives or small business owners about the business climate. Two things have been fairly consistent. One, they're not driving enough traffic. Sometimes they think that their branding message is out of date. These probably aren't issues for you. That can stimulate a lot of pain, and then you can go right into your system and start extending the pain into the future. So I guess what I want to leave you with is make sure you take this slide when you review this presentation again, and you put this in your own vernacular, verbiage, whatever, so that you can lead with something similar to this slide. A couple of mistakes. Training sales. I don't really think that I can train sales. I'm a behaviorist the way I really look at it. What behavior do you want to change instead of be trained on? That's the way I think you should look at it. What behavior should you be doing? What behavior do you want to reinforce that you're already doing and working well? And what behavior do you want to change, as opposed to, I'm going to be trained to do something like a Pavlik's dogs or something like that. Think about it that way as far as what behavior can I change? Stop thinking about deliverables as far as what you can deliver, and start thinking about what are the symptoms, the pains that your clients have. Start talking first about their pains instead of leading with your deliverables. This is what we can do. And when I use the word deliverables, substitute benefits and features with it. Okay. So that's today. So here's what I want to hear from you guys. Each person's got to give me, each person on the call still has got to give me, as a result of today's training, one, either what did you take away? What was an aha moment for you? Two, what behavior are you going to change as a result of sitting through this today? And three, what's the takeaway? What are you going to do? So one of those three, I got to hear from you. Okay. And I'm going to start with Troy, you're on the screen first. So.
Yeah, I knew you were going to ask this. So 10 minutes ago, I come up with something, but now I forgot what it was.
I hate it when that happens.
I think one thing that did jump out at me was, being careful that you're not asking, one of your earliest slides about don't start questions with these certain words and the reasons for it. Try to keep it more open-ended, and so it doesn't sound like, that you're just asking one question and after another and interrogating. And also the Walter Cronkite just saying, because, just prompting them just to keep on going.
Got it. Okay. Chris?
I was actually going to say the same exact thing, because that's part of what we used to do in my previous sales, is using the words that, that start like that sound like you're being aggressive. So just getting better at making sure I use proper verbs, the words and tone.
Okay. Leah?
The verb questions for me.
Oh, Dave, go ahead. The verb, yeah.
Yeah. Don't end with a definitive and with a open.
Yeah, because you're trying to get more information. You're not trying to push them and give them information. You're trying to get more information. So if you end with a period, it just ends. It's a statement. It hangs there like a dangling participle.
Yeah.
Okay. Leah,
And they're
anything
on-
for you that you wanted to say? Oh, Dave, I cut you off. I apologize.
That's all right. Go ahead.
Serve, don't sell. I think that was important when you started with it. To make sure that we're serving whatever their need is rather than trying to sell them. And then also keep it open. Like you said, would you be so kind? Can I share with you? I don't suppose, making sure to ask open questions.
Good.
To get their permission.
I think we don't do a very good job of telling prospects what this system is. You know, you can even say to them, hey, as opposed to trying to today to sell you, my purpose really is to service you. And I can't service you without really understanding what it is you're trying to accomplish. So I'm going to ask you a lot of questions. I hope that's okay. Yeah, I don't think we tell people exactly what our system is. And it isn't the secret. This isn't something that you have to hold back. Tell them, I don't want to come across as a salesperson that's trying to push you to make a decision. I want to learn more about what it is you're trying to accomplish so that then I can decide whether my product or service can fulfill those needs and wishes. I hope that's okay.
I'm glad
Yeah.
that I want to memorize that one. That was good.
I'm sorry, what'd you say?
I said, I'm glad this is recorded because I want to memorize what exactly you just said. That was good.
You know why? A lot of people say, boy, I wish you were on my shoulder when I went to go talk to people. And then, you know, it's easy here in a training for me to recite stuff. The mind is a wonderful, fantastic thing until you get in front of a client. And sometimes you forget all this training. But if you go into it with a concept, I really am curious and skeptical about this client's need. I'm not walking in here with a preconceived notion of what I'm going to sell them. I'm not walking in here convinced I'm going to try and sell you a monument sign just because you sent in or we talked about it on the phone that you want a monument sign. I want to find out what your real problems are so that I can decide maybe a pole sign might be better. I hope that's okay, that I'm going to start, you know, without a preconceived notion of what I'm trying to sell you. Those are the type of conversations people really want to have with salespeople. They want to think of you as a trusted advisor and somebody's going to try and sell them something.
I think that nurturing parent, you know, I thought that was the biggest thing I got today is just staying in that mode as a nurturing parent, as you're navigating through these conversations, eliminate the periods at the end and eliminate the words at the front and stay in that softening mode with the questions and really bring information out through that. I just think that's something, and you said it, the person should be practicing that. You know, sort of put your mind in that mode before you go into a meeting that I'm going to go in as a nurturing parent. I'm going to remember these types of things and then just carry that conversation through and then just sort of analyze it when you get done. How did I do? And I think that was really critical today.
Well, and I appreciate that because my next step when I'm there live in a couple of weeks again, it's going to be, we're going to really practice this. So you guys should between now and then practice. We're going to break into groups and you're going to practice being nurturing, asking questions, curious, skeptical, and we're going to stop trying to sound like the salesperson that's got all the answers.
Right.
You know, I really don't know, you know, right now at the beginning, Mr. Prospect, what the best way to solve some of your problems. I hope it's okay if we can just have a conversation so that I can get a little bit more insight as to what you're trying to accomplish, so that I can take that back to the design team and they can take, you know, our conversation today and create a sign for you. So I hope that's okay. That sounds more nurturing than, oh gosh, we've been doing this for years. We know what we're doing. I've got a great design. They're going to come up. You're going to love it. It's completely different. Who have I not heard from?
I think you heard from everybody.
Okay. All right. Yep. Well, I'll right now when I end this, then it converts it for a while, and after it converts it, I'll send you the link to this so that you can follow it again. Okay.
Good.
All right, folks. Have a good day out there. Thank you very much.
Take care.
Thanks, Wayne.
Right. You're welcome. Thank you.